This month in the Worldwise Book Club we looked at Sun-Mi Hwang and her novel The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly. This book is a bit different from what we usually look at, a bit more simple, but it has quite a lot of complex issues and themes that we dissected as a group. The story centres around Sprout, a little hen who's battery farmed and dreams that one day she can be free to sit on her eggs and raise her chicks as she deems, rather than have a farmer come and take them away. Which she sort of gets, but not in the way that she expects. Sprout stops laying enough eggs for the farmers to deem her worthy to keep, so they decide to kill her off. Sprout survives this and wakes up in a pile of other dead chickens, about to be attacked by a weasel. Then suddenly a mallard leaps to her aid. This is the mallard Straggler. She knows he's called Straggler because she named him that herself. She names all of the animals that she watched from her cage, idolizing them and their freedom to roam. She would give them names that reflected their personalities, and then gave herself a name that reflected her personality as well. She called herself Sprout because she felt that she was adaptable, and that she could grow and change depending on what her environment was. After being saved by Straggler, Sprout tries to return to the barn and meet the other animals who are allowed to roam free, but they reject her, and she's so saddened by this that she returns to the wilderness. But this time, she finds an unattended egg that she promptly sits on top of in case its mother doesn't come back. Whilst she sits on top of this egg, Straggler protects her, bringing her fish and fighting off the weasel at night, and then eventually sacrifices himself so that the weasel will have a full belly and won't attack the egg once it hatches. The egg hatches and it's a duckling inside, but Sprout doesn't care. She doesn't even realise at first. This is just her baby. She raises him and tries to take him back to the farm where he'll be safe, but they're once again rejected, so she has to trek out into the wilderness, protecting her baby, fighting off the weasel at night, and even gouging out one of its eyes. Eventually the duckling grows up, and she calls him Green Top, after his green plumage. It becomes obvious that this was Straggler's child, and that the mother was killed in a weasel attack. Eventually, Green Top feels the need to grow up as other ducks do. He needs to swim, he needs to fly, and he needs to migrate. He wants to fly off with the other ducks that he sees. Sprout is saddened by this, but realises that he must grow up. And she then stumbles across a small hole, which has baby weasels inside. She then realises that the weasel she's been fighting is also a mother, just struggling to keep her babies alive. And whilst Green Top flies off to migrate and become an adult, she sacrifices herself so that the weasel can eat, and thus produce milk so her babies won't starve. Sun-Mi Hwang, when asked about the death of Sprout, has said, "For me, death isn't a sad ending. It is a continuation of a character's growth, the accomplishments of life after one's wishes have been realised." Many people at the group thought the opposite and thought it was too sad that Sprout had died. But then, there were some students who studied Korean that said this was quite indicative of Korean culture, sacrificing yourself for the betterment of society as a whole. Sun-Mi Hwang has also said that the book is based on her impoverished childhood, where her father struggled to keep afloat with his low-earning job, and she couldn't even afford to go to middle school. The only reason that she managed to get into high school was passing an entrance exam after reading obsessively through her middle school years. Though she never took any classes, a kindly teacher gave her books and allowed her to sit in the classroom after lessons had finished. Hwang has also said that the book is partly based on her own life and managing to overcome other people's expectations of her, expecting her not to achieve anything because she came from a poor background. But she's now a successful author and university lecturer. Obviously, this book then became a very successful film, particularly successful in China. Whilst being one of the most successful animated movies for decades in South Korea, it was also the only animated movie from South Korea ever to break out to a Chinese audience, opening at almost every theatre in the country, to great success. The director of the film, who was struggling previously, has said that South Korean films should aim more towards a Chinese audience rather than an American audience as they have in the past. We analysed the differences between the book and the film, and found that we preferred the book, but that seems to always be the way. The film is a lot simpler and a lot more childlike, particularly aimed to a family audience. There's a whole subplot about Green Top growing up and becoming the guard duck that none of us found very interesting. In the film, the names were also changed, which I think is a terrible thing to happen because the names were so important within the novel. Sprout is now called Leafie and her son Greenie, though in the American translation she's called Daisy and her son is called Willie after his father, no longer called Straggler, now called Wilson. It was generally agreed within the group that this was a bad move on the filmmaker's part, but the film was very successful. From this we went on to talk about South Korean society as a whole and how much of literature today is aimed at an audience who feel very disenfranchised with their country, dissatisfied with what is happening, particularly with the North-South divide of Korea. Many books focus on tales of travelling into North Korea as a spy, or North Koreans trying to re-assimilate into the South Korean culture, or South Koreans travelling to other countries and viewing how united that nation is and feeling pangs of jealousy, but also a sadness that their country may never be unified. Next month, on the 10th of February, we'll be discussing Spanish literature and Soldiers of Salamis by Javier Cerces. It's a novel focusing on the Spanish Civil War, and it's really interesting. We really encourage anyone to come down who's interested in that. That's the 10th of February at 3 o'clock in the Worldwise Centre. If you missed the meeting on Korean literature but still have something to say, you can comment here or you can comment on our Worldwise blog, and absolutely feel free to come down to the next session. Whether you've read the book, seen the film, or neither, just come down for a discussion in general. We encourage everyone to enjoy literature and join in the fun.